Hello, I'm Taylor, and we are talking about how the RT-PCR test works. So for the RT-PCR, the RT actually stands for reverse transcriptase, which is going to be the actual enzyme that goes from RNA that helps make RNA into DNA. And so with that, first we have to start with the virus. The virus is made of RNA. That's their genetic material, is RNA. So we have to go from RNA to DNA. And to do that, we need to use the enzyme reverse transcriptase, and that is going to look at a specific piece. It's looking at the N gene, and it is going to look at a specific piece of that RNA, and it's going to copy that, and it's going to make it into the DNA complement. Or it's going to make it into, transcript it from RNA into DNA. So then we can look at the DNA portion of it. And so what the PCR test is doing is basically making a whole bunch of something out of a little of something. So first we have to do the reverse transcriptase, which is just that enzyme that is going to target that RNA piece and it's going to transcribe it into DNA. So once we've done that, we are going to take that newly made DNA piece that is a mirror or a complement or almost a copy of it. It's the other side of it. We are going to take that DNA and put it in a mixture with nutrients and primers and everything it needs to grow and do its job. And first we have to denature it. So that is going to be heating it up really hot. And then it's going to separate the DNA strands, which are usually coiled together. It's going to separate out into two. And so then we have primers that come in and they target a certain piece of that DNA strand, and they're the pieces that bind, or they're the pieces that start reading the DNA. And then they start making copies of it. That's what happens. They read the DNA, that specific piece of it, and then they start making copies of that specific piece of it. And then they come together in the end, and then you have a whole new DNA strand. And then they go together. And then we have to use, so before we used reverse transcriptase to go from RNA to DNA, and now we're in DNA. DNA is going to use the polymerase enzyme to continue replicating that DNA, specific DNA sequence. And that's going to happen 30 to 40 times until we can get a good quantity to where we can see something happening or not happening, and how we can also see how accurate it is. And that's why there can be false negatives and false positives, because if you target the DNA of the virus or the RNA piece, a specific piece, and if it's that specific piece does not have any type of viral infection or anything like crazy, then it's not going to pick it up. Because the virus starts with RNA, but if it keeps replicating and replicating and replicating, there's a possibility for the false positives and false negatives. So that is how the PCR test works. Thank you.